and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here and you like the content, please make sure you hit like and subscribe. Thanks a bunch. Alright, so today, by popular demand, we are finally going to chat about this pretty ultra bitchin' shred Telecaster that I've had for a few years now, that every time I use this in a video, you guys ask me about it in general, so today's the day, we're going to talk about it. What it is quite obviously a shred tele. This is an early 80s Japanese-made Washburn Tour 24. I think it was called the Chicago series. Yeah, you can see it says so on the headstock right there, Chicago. And yeah, just there's not a lot of information about these guitars floating around on the internet, obviously because they are quite old. They were only made, I think, from 82 through to 85. And of course, they were made in Japan, and they came with a bunch of different configurations and features, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Oh, one thing I will mention, if you are new to the channel and you're looking for something more like tones, I do have some, but they're near the back of the video, so please just use the timestamps down here and follow that to the content you're looking for. Thanks a bunch. Anyway, enough blabbering, let's get going. Alright guys, so the guitar itself, quite obviously, we are looking at a shred tele, or a super tele if you will. This kind of red binding on black, I think this was a look kind of pioneered by Washburn. You definitely see it on quite a few of their guitars in the early 80s. Like I think on the A20 you could get it like this, as long as a few other models from this era. Now there were a few different variations of this particular guitar you could find. I've seen ones that came in white with black binding. I've seen a little bit more of a rare one which was black with white binding, and of course there's this one here which is the fairly common one, which is the black with red binding. So you will see these around quite frequently. This one, as you can see, the headstock's kind of fading a little bit orange. That's just a screen print logo that's on there. And of course, I mean, this thing is probably somewhere between 82 to 85. So yeah, not too shocking this has started to fade a little bit with age, but I gotta say the rest of this is holding up quite nicely. All right guys, so despite the name up here on the headstock saying Chicago, this guitar really has nothing to do with that city. This is definitely not a USA made guitar. These Washburns, this series specifically, was made in Japan. And if I'm not mistaken, all of the guitars out of Washburn from this time period were Japanese made. Washburn does have an American facility, but I'm pretty sure that didn't happen until either 89 or 90, maybe 91, around that era anyway. So for the time period, anything you come across that is Washburn, despite what the headstock would have you believe, is indeed a Japanese-made instrument. Now dating these things is a little bit tricky. I'm pretty certain of the era just due to some advertising you can find still on the internet of these particular guitars or the range that they belong to. What I've heard is they were made from 82 through to 85. I'm pretty sure this model is an 84 model just because of the serial number. It starts off with an 84. Well, obviously you can see on the heel there it says made in Japan, which is nice, and of course puts to bed any conversation about this not being a Japanese made instrument. But yeah, that's why I think this one is an 84, that and because of the hardware that's on here, but we'll talk about that a little bit more a bit later on. But I think this is probably an 84 model, probably safe to say. And yeah, again, these are getting quite rare just because they are old. And you don't see a lot of them pop up. And when you do, they're usually this kind of, this model here with this kind of color scheme, but not a super common model. Anyway, I obviously quite enjoy this because it is a shred tele. And as most of you guys probably know if you follow this channel, I love a good shred tele. Alright guys, so the body is obviously a Telecaster shape. This is quite nice. You can see it's got this lovely red binding all around, single bound. I'm going to say that this thing is heavy. And how heavy, you might ask? Alright, let's see how heavy this thing is. 9-pound guitar. Heavy. Yeah, so bloody heavy. And I think that's on account of the wood used for this being ash. So a fairly dense wood is, as far as I know. As far as creature comforts, you don't really get any. This is pretty much your standard T-style Telecaster shape. Obviously, access appears the same as like a Fender Telecaster from this period. You don't have any sort of cutaway on the heel joint here for your hand, but that's okay. Access is still very good. On the back side here, obviously you've got that cover there for your tremolo. And you have this tummy cut, which is kind of a nice added bonus feature. So yeah, that's pretty good. As far as the configuration, quite obviously, this is hum-hum. You get a 3-way toggle switch, volume control, and a tone knob. These obviously are not stock. That's something I did. Some of you know I have this weird habit of putting dice on things. These actually came off of an old Aria Pro 2 Night Warrior RS I had years and years ago. Love that guitar. Anyway, it's long gone, but these were the knobs I had on that, and now they're on this. So yeah, anyway, nice little touch. Oh, and obviously with the pickups on this, you can see here, they are Washburn branded. They look kind of like EMGs, but they're not. These are indeed passive pickups. I'm going to say they're pretty hot. I don't mind the sound out of these at all. I've done quite a few videos with this guitar now using these pickups. And yeah, they're fine. One thing I will say, if you're playing with a lot of high gain, they are a little bit microphonic, so you will get some unwanted feedback potentially, depending on what your application is. If you're playing more cleaner stuff or even just mild crunch, no worries. Just I find this when I've got a good drive pedal in front of a pretty cranked amp, they do like to squeal back at me just a teeny little bit. But yeah, they sound pretty good. All right, and the bridge. Obviously, you guys can see this here. Let me get close. That is a Floyd Rose 2, and I believe this is actually a Floyd Rose 2 from the late 80s that was put on this. This is a really good unit. Stays in tune. As you can see, it's been decked for dive only, and yeah, as you can tell, it's got a D-tuner on there. I put that on there so I can switch in and out of drop D if I wish to do so. Pretty nice. This works well. This is not the stock bridge, obviously, though. What came on this was this thing. This is just an atrocity of a bridge. There's all kinds of bridge options that came on these guitars. You could get them like this, which is almost looks sort of like a Floyd Rose-ish, but not quite. I haven't actually used this bridge. This was already swapped when I bought the guitar, so I have no idea how these perform. I will say the quality doesn't look to be too great on this thing. Like, you can see all sorts of imperfections in the steel. It just, yeah, I don't know, probably garbage. Anyway, that's likely why this was changed by the previous owner before I got it anyway, but I found it in the case, and yeah, I haven't put it back on there, and I have no intention to. Now, aside from these strange bridges, you could find these things with all sorts of neat bridges. I've seen them with kind of Kaler style stuff, bridges more akin to a Floyd Rose, and I've also seen them equip, the earlier models anyway, with the Washburn Wonder Bar system, which is a pretty neat kind of Kaler-ish looking trem. I've always wanted to try one of those. Never had the opportunity, but they look to be pretty darn interesting. And of course, obviously with a bridge like this, you end up needing a trem cavity in the back here like that. So a little bit of a departure from your classic kind of Telecaster, but hey, this is a shreddy Super Tele, and it looks pretty darn metal, doesn't it? All right, so the neck. The neck, as you can see, actually has some more of that lovely red binding throughout, which looks fantastic. This isn't the flattest of necks. It's got a bit of curve to it. I've read online in a couple spots that this is a 9.5 inch radius, and you know what? Yeah, I'd buy that. It seems to have a bit more of curve to it than some of my Gibsons, so yeah, that checks out. Probably around 9.5 on this. Oh, interesting. You can see up here I've got a lock nut. This is obviously an R2 style lock nut for a Floyd Rose. I put this one up here. The lock nut that came with this was different. It came with this craptacular trem system here. And I had to change it because when I bought it, I guess something must have fallen into the neck at some point, but just specifically on the lock nut and actually chipped the steel. So it had to go, and I figured, well, you know what, we've already got a Floyd Rose 2 in here. Why don't we go ahead and just put in a Floyd Rose style lock nut as well? And yeah, it's been extremely stable ever since. The frets themselves, as you can see, look to be jumbo, and of course they're just nickel, which makes sense for the period. One thing that is a bit of a different item with this particular guitar is you only have 21 frets instead of the usual 22. Very normal for like a Telecaster style or even a Strat really of the era, but if you're playing, you know, hair metal or something, you might want the extra fret. It really depends what you're playing. I don't find this to be too much of a hindrance at all, and it still looks hella bitchin' and does what it's supposed to, so yeah, no concerns there for me. The profile itself, oh yeah, obviously this is painted on the back. I think this is a maple neck, but the profile itself is supposed to be a D. It's a fairly substantial neck. A little bit slimmer than a Fender from this era, but definitely not a slim neck by any stretch of the imagination. This is quite comfortable in the hand. Definitely doesn't feel thin like a Jackson or a Fernandez or that kind of shreddy thing from this era. A little bit more substantial. The headstock obviously is a bit of a nod to the traditional Telecaster style, but a bit of a Washburn spin. I actually quite like the shape of this. It reminds me a little bit of modern Godin style stuff, just with a bit of a bigger ball end back here, but overall quite a nice nice shape. And here are the tuners. Nothing too special about the tuners. They are unbranded, and you do see these tuners pop up on other 80s import guitars from this era. Specifically, I've seen them on the Takamine stuff that you find, the electrics they were doing briefly in the early 80s. Same style of tuners. I will say these feel pretty nice. The ratios feel good. They're very smooth, so no real need to change these at all. But again, we've got a lock nut and fine tuners, so there really was never a need to change those anyway, unless you just wanted some sort of different tuners for aesthetic purposes. But yeah, these work just fine. All right, let's get into some tones. I'll play a bit clean here just so you can kind of hear how these pickups sound on their own. And then more towards the end, I'll do kind of a rocky production because you guys seem to like that stuff. Anyway, let's go. Alright guys, there you have it. That is my review on the Washburn Tour 24 Chicago guitar, produced in 1984-ish in Japan. Really cool vintage Telecaster, really cool vintage shredder in general, super metal looking, sounds pretty darn good, plays fantastically. Yeah, these are getting pretty rare. Honestly, this is the only one I've come across personally. I mean, you see these on the internet on occasion, but not very commonly. Yeah, really cool guitar. If you're in the market for a shred tele and you want something vintage that is not super duper expensive, you can find yourself one of these. These are really great. Pricing on them is creeping up, but honestly, that kind of makes sense. This is a made in Japan quality shred tele from the 80s. So yeah, really, really lovely guitar. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you found this some way informative or useful. If you did, please consider hitting like and subscribe to help my channel grow a little bit. And as per usual, just keep on shredding and we will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now.